I remember that call very clearly, not because of what was said, but because it was the first time in 30 years that I heard my father cry. Not a slight tremble in his voice, not a brief pause. It was real, the kind of crying that comes from fear. He said he needed me. Just 3 words, direct and without hesitation. I stood in my small kitchen, still holding a wooden spoon, the salmon on the stove beginning to burn without me noticing. I didn't answer right away, not because I was surprised, but because I had always known this moment would come. I just didn't expect it to come this late. He asked me to come home for dinner on Sunday. Said the whole family would be there. That phrase stayed with me. The whole family. 2 years ago I had learned that it didn't include me. I closed my eyes for a second, and in that brief moment I was back at the point where my life split into 2 parts. Before I knew I could die, and after I realized no one in my family truly cared if I did. I agreed to come. My voice was calm, too calm. He sounded relieved, like something heavy had been lifted. But he didn't ask anything else. Not how I was living, not whether I was okay, not even if I was still alive. The call ended in less than 2 minutes. I set the phone down and looked at the dark screen. Then I smiled, a small, cold smile. Because during that entire call he didn't know one thing. The daughter he was calling, the one he believed would come back to take care of him, had once been lying alone on the bathroom floor, too weak to stand, calling him through tears and being turned away. 2 years ago. Exactly 2 years. His answer that day was just 4 words. 4 words I never forgot. I walked over and turned off the stove. The smell of burnt food filled the room, but I didn't open the window. I just stood there staring into nothing, and for the first time in a long while I opened something I had tried to forget. A folder on my phone. It was called Family. Inside there were no photos, no memories, just messages, call logs, and a long list of chemotherapy sessions. Next to each one, a single word repeated over and over. Non. 36 times, not a single person showed up. I scrolled down and stopped at one entry. A call at 8:47 inches the morning, 2 minutes and 31 seconds, the day I told my father I had cancer. I stared at the screen, and for the first time I didn't feel pain anymore, just clarity. This Sunday I would go back. Not for reunion, not for forgiveness, but to return exactly the same 4 words he once gave me. He didn't know that yet. And he didn't know that this time nothing would be the same. But to understand why I could say those 4 words, you would have to go back to the day I learned I might die. I used to think I was fine. Not in the sense that everything was perfect, but enough to keep going. A stable job, a small but clean apartment, a life that didn't depend on anyone else. My name is Camille Atwood. I was 28 at the time, a senior graphic designer at a mid-sized agency in Boston. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. I built it from nothing, starting as an intern, working late, taking on the projects no one else wanted. 5 years later, I had a position I knew I earned. No one in my family celebrated that. There was no dinner, no real congratulations, just a message from my mother. A single emoji, and at the time I told myself it was enough. I lived in a small apartment in Somerville. Nothing special, but it was the only place where I could breathe normally. I had a routine, a rhythm, a life that felt stable. More importantly, it felt like something no one could take away from me. At least that's what I believed. Because the moment you look at my family, everything starts to shift. From the outside, we looked perfect. My father, Richard Atwood, was the kind of man who didn't need to raise his voice to control a room. He spoke once, and everything moved the way he wanted. No one questioned him. No one asked why. We just followed. Then, there was my younger brother, Derek. 2 years younger, but treated like the center of everything. Opportunities came to him easily. A place at Boston College paid for without hesitation, while I took on $87,000 in loans just to attend a public school. No one offered to help me. No one asked if I needed it. It was simply understood that I wasn't the priority. When Derek got his first job, there was a party. When I got promoted, there was silence. It took me years to understand what that meant. In my family, I wasn't the first choice. I was the backup, someone who could exist or not and it wouldn't change much. But I still tried. I kept trying to be good enough to be seen, to be valued, until Derek got engaged. Her name was Megan, perfect in every way my mother wanted. The wedding planning started immediately, and from that moment on, everything in the family revolved around it. Every conversation, every dinner, every detail. Except me. I was there physically, sitting at the table, smiling when needed, nodding when spoken to. But I wasn't really present. No one asked about my life, my work, or how I felt. And over time, I got used to it. That's the dangerous part. You can get used to being invisible. It doesn't feel like pain anymore. It just feels normal. Until one day, something breaks that pattern. It was a Wednesday afternoon, a completely ordinary day. I was at my desk, buried in deadlines, messages popping up constantly, everything under control. Then my phone rang. An unknown number. I almost ignored it, just 1 second away from letting it pass. But I answered. The voice on the other end wasn't casual. It wasn't routine. And in that moment, I knew something was wrong. What I didn't know was that within minutes, everything I thought I had built, everything I believed was stable, would collapse. And that was the moment I called my father. The nurse's voice was too gentle. That was the first thing I noticed. Not the words, but the tone. It was soft in a way that didn't feel comforting, only heavy. She said they had my biopsy results and that the doctor wanted to see me the next morning at 8. I didn't answer right away, not because I didn't understand, but because I understood too well. Hospitals don't rush you in like that for good news. I said yes. My voice didn't sound like mine. After the call ended, everything around me kept moving. Messages, emails, deadlines. The world didn't pause. But inside, something had already started to collapse. That night, I met Harper like I always did, but I barely spoke. She looked at me more than once, like she wanted to ask what was wrong but didn't. There are moments when even you don't have the words yet. I went home early and lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, waiting for something I knew would change everything. The next morning, I arrived at the hospital early, as if being 10 minutes ahead could somehow shift the outcome. The room looked like every other clinic. White walls, certificates, a plant in the corner. Everything designed to feel calm. But it wasn't real. When the doctor said the words, she didn't hesitate. Breast cancer, stage 3. I heard it clearly, every syllable. But it didn't reach me immediately. It was like my mind needed time to accept that those words belonged to my life. She kept talking about treatment, urgency, next steps. But the room felt distant. The sound faded. For a moment, I wasn't there anymore. Then she asked if someone could take me home. That question hit harder than the diagnosis. Who would I call? Without thinking, I said I would call my father. Because that's what you do. When everything falls apart, you call your family. I walked into the hallway, found a chair, and sat down. My hands were shaking so badly it took me 3 tries to dial his number. He picked up. His voice was normal, calm, unchanged. I told him. I said I had cancer, that it was stage 3, that I was scared. I cried quietly, waiting for something from him. Just one sentence. Something simple, something human. There was silence. Then he said he needed to tell me something. His voice changed. It wasn't confused or emotional. It was controlled. He said they couldn't deal with this right now. I didn't understand at first. Then he explained. Derek's wedding was coming. There were too many things to handle. In that moment, I didn't know whether to laugh or break. I tried to speak, but he cut me off. He said I was strong, that I had always been independent, that I would manage. Then he said he had to go. They were finalizing wedding payments. The call ended before I could say anything else. I sat there, phone still against my ear, listening to nothing. Around me, people moved through the hospital. Patients, doctors, families. Everyone had someone beside them. Except me. I looked at the call log. 8:47 inches the morning. 2 minutes and 31 seconds. I took a screenshot. Not because I wanted to remember, but because a part of me already knew I might need proof. I created a folder and named it Family. Inside there was no love, no care, just silence. That was the day I understood something I had never allowed myself to see. Family is not always the place you run to. Sometimes it is the place you learn to walk away from. And at that moment, I still didn't know. The worst part hadn't even begun yet. On my first day of chemotherapy, I drove myself to the hospital. No one sat beside me. No one asked if I had eaten. No one told me everything would be okay. There was only me and an empty chair next to me. The infusion room was on the 4th floor, wide, quiet, arranged in a semicircle. Each chair had its own IV stand, a small screen, and a space meant for someone to sit beside you, someone who came with you. I was assigned to chair number 7. I sat down, placed my bag beside me, and folded my hands together to keep them from shaking. A nurse named Rita spoke to me. Her voice was warm, steady, almost enough to make me cry. She said everyone is afraid the first time and that most people bring someone with them. Then she said it was okay. I nodded, but inside I knew it wasn't okay. The IV started. The first drop entered my body slowly. Cold? Real. I looked around the room. A woman sat with her husband holding her hand the entire time. A teenage boy listened to his mother read softly beside him. An older man was being fed soup by his daughter, one spoon at a time. I looked to my side. The chair was empty. That was when it truly settled in. Not the illness, but the absence. The session lasted 4 hours. I didn't turn on the screen. I didn't listen to music. I just watched the liquid drip one drop at a time, as if I could measure time itself leaving me. When it ended, the nurse asked if someone was coming to pick me up. I said no. I would drive myself. Walking out felt like moving through something that no longer belonged to me. My body was there, but it didn't feel like mine anymore. On the way home, I had to stop twice. Not because of the car, but because I couldn't see clearly. Everything blurred. I didn't know if it was the medication or the tears. Probably both. That night I texted my mother. I told her I had started chemotherapy and that I was scared. I waited. Minutes passed, then hours. No response. Eventually my body gave in. The nausea hit hard, not like anything I had known before. It felt like my body was rejecting itself. I knelt on the bathroom floor and kept going, until there was nothing left, but it didn't stop. When I finally crawled out and lay on the floor, everything was spinning. The cold surface beneath me was the only thing that felt stable. My phone vibrated. I reached for it. A message from my mother. She told me to stay strong. Then she asked whether peonies or roses would look better for the wedding. I read it again and again. Then I took a screenshot and added it to the folder. Not out of anger, but out of clarity. Because I knew one day I might question myself. I might wonder if I had exaggerated things, if they weren't really that bad. But they were. I replied that roses would be nice. That was all. I didn't tell her what had just happened. I didn't tell her I couldn't stand that I had been on the floor, that I wished someone was there. Because I already knew they wouldn't come. That was when something inside me shifted. Not loudly, not all at once. I simply stopped expecting, stopped waiting, stopped believing they would show up. And when you stop expecting, something strange happens. You stop being disappointed. But that doesn't mean it stops hurting. It just means you learn how to carry it alone. The next 3 sessions were the same, quiet, repetitive, empty. Until one day, someone sat down beside me. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't have to pretend I was okay. That moment changed everything. After the 3rd chemotherapy session, I began to understand something clearly. The human body can endure a lot, but emotions cannot adapt in the same way. You can get used to nausea, to waking up in pain at 3 in the morning, to watching your hair fall out day by day. But there is one thing that never becomes easier: the feeling that no one truly cares. I kept texting my mother, not because I believed she would change, but because a part of me still hadn't given up completely. The messages were simple updates about my treatments, my side effects, my days off work. Nothing dramatic, nothing demanding, just the kind of things a daughter would normally share. But her responses were always late and never aligned with what I said. Short replies, distracted, often shifting back to wedding plans. It felt like we were living in two different realities. One where I was trying to survive, and another where everything revolved around flowers and decorations. At some point, I started saving everything. Not just messages, but call logs, timestamps, missed calls. At first, I told myself it was because my memory might blur. But deep down, I knew the truth. I was collecting evidence. Not to confront them, but to protect myself. Because when you are treated a certain way for long enough, you begin to question your own memory. You start asking yourself if you are overreacting, if things are really that bad. And eventually you forgive people not because they deserve it, but because you are no longer sure what is real. I didn't want that to happen. So I kept everything, every message, every silence. The folder grew, and as it did, something inside me became emptier. Until the fourth session. I was in the same chair, number 7, alone as always, watching the IV drip slowly. Then someone spoke to me. She asked if I always came alone. I gave my usual answer that I was fine. It was automatic, almost reflexive, but she didn't accept it. She repeated the question directly this time. I hesitated, then gave a simple explanation. My family was busy. My brother was preparing for his wedding. It was enough to end the conversation, but for some reason I kept talking. She didn't react with pity or judgment. She just listened, then asked when my treatment would end. When I answered, she made a connection I hadn't said out loud. The timing overlapped with the wedding. That silence that followed was brief but heavy. Then she mentioned something about the hospital keeping records. Logs of every visit, every patient, every visitor. Some people requested copies, she said, to keep memories. The word memory felt strange in that context. I didn't fully understand why she told me that, but something clicked. I asked if I could get that record. She simply said yes. 3 days later, I held the document in my hands. My name at the top, dates, times, rooms, and one column at the end. Visitors. I started reading. The first line said none. The second line said none. The third line said none. I kept going. 10 lines, 20, 30. All the same. 36 sessions. 0 visitors. I didn't cry, not then. I just sat there holding the paper, and for the first time I stopped questioning everything. There were no more, maybe no more excuses, no more doubts. Just the truth. I folded the paper and placed it in the folder with everything else. And in that moment, something inside me ended completely. Not the weak part. The part that still hoped. But I didn't know yet that something worse was still waiting. Because when the wedding came, I would finally understand exactly where I stood in that family. Derek's wedding was set for October 15th, a day I should have been there not for tradition or appearances, but because it was my family, at least on paper. At that time, I was in the middle of chemotherapy cycles. Not at my worst, but not well either. Just a brief window where I could stand, get dressed, go outside, and look almost normal. I thought maybe I could go. Sit quietly in a corner, not draw attention, just be there. Like a stranger watching from a distance. That small thought gave me something fragile to hold on to. A sense that maybe I still belonged somewhere. Until my father called. He said they had discussed it and that it would be better if I didn't attend. The words were light, almost casual, but they landed heavily. I asked why. He said I didn't look well, that I had lost weight, that my hair would draw attention, that it was Derek's day and they didn't want anything to take away from it. In that moment, I understood something completely. I wasn't being excluded because I had done something wrong. I was being removed because I was inconvenient. I said I understood. Calmly, too calmly. The call ended without argument, without any attempt to include me. The decision had already been made, without me. On the day of the wedding, I stayed home. Alone. Weak from treatment, lying in bed with my phone beside me. A notification appeared. My mother had posted photos. I didn't want to open them, but I did. They looked perfect. My father smiling, my mother emotional, Derek and Megan at the center, surrounded by guests, light and flowers. Everything carefully arranged. I wasn't there. The caption said it was the happiest day of their family. I read it slowly, then took a screenshot and added it to the folder. Not because they hated me, but because they didn't need me. That kind of absence doesn't attack you directly. It erases you. 3 weeks later, the medical bills arrived. One after another, numbers that added up to $47,000. The cost of staying alive. I sold my car, cut every expense, but it wasn't enough. Eventually, I did something I had promised myself I wouldn't do again. I asked my father for help. I kept the message simple, respectful, asking for a loan I would repay. It took me 20 minutes to send it. He replied 2 hours later. They had spent a lot on the wedding. There was nothing left. I could try a bank loan. My credit was good. No apology, no concern, just a financial suggestion. I read it several times, then saved it like everything else. 47,000 to live, 80,000 for a single day. That comparison didn't make me angry. It made everything clear. I opened my laptop and applied for a personal loan. High interest, but it didn't matter. It was the only option. Because at that point, I understood something completely. If I wanted to survive, I would have to save myself. No one else was coming. Not family, not parents. Just me. And even then, I still didn't know the worst part was coming. Because there was a night, one I will never forget, when my body completely gave out, and I had no choice but to call the person I already knew would not answer. That night started like any other, at least at first. It was after my 4th chemotherapy session, and the doctor had warned me that the side effects would build up, each one worse than the last. I had nodded as if I understood, but nothing could prepare you for what it actually felt like. Around 11 at night, the nausea came. Not mild, not gradual, but overwhelming, like my body was about to lose control. I went into the bathroom, closed the door, and sat on the floor. Then it began. The first wave hit hard, sudden, violent, without warning. I held onto the toilet as my body turned against itself. Even after there was nothing left, it didn't stop. My body kept forcing, as if trying to push out something that wasn't there. When I finally lifted my head, everything was spinning. The walls, the floor, the ceiling, nothing stayed still. I tried to stand, but my legs didn't respond. I slipped back down, sitting on the cold tile, feeling how real it all was. At that moment, nothing else mattered. Not work, not the future, not even family. Just one question: would I make it through the night? I looked into the mirror. The light was harsh, and the person staring back didn't look like me. Hollow eyes, pale skin, and my hair starting to fall out in clumps. I reached up and touched it. A handful came loose and stayed in my palm. I just looked at it. No tears, no reaction. Just watched, as if a part of me had quietly left. Then I laughed. A small, empty sound. Because in that moment I realized I had no control left. Not over my body, not over my life, not over anything. At 2:47 inches the morning, I picked up my phone and called my mother. The line rang again and again. No answer. I called back. And again. Eventually it went to voicemail. I didn't leave a message. There was nothing left to say. I just kept calling like a reflex, like a child, still believing someone would come. At 3:05 I stopped. Not because I didn't need help anymore, but because I understood. I lay there staring at the ceiling, and the tears came quietly. Then I did something that changed everything. I opened my contacts and found Harper's name. Without thinking, I sent a message. I think I need help. No explanation, no details. Just that. I didn't expect anything. I wasn't hoping. I just tried. 40 minutes later, there was a knock on the door. I couldn't get up right away. I had to crawl slowly, painfully, inch by inch until I reached the door and opened it. Harper was there. Still in her scrubs, hair tied back hastily, face bare, eyes clear. She didn't ask questions. She didn't hesitate. She just stepped inside and helped me. She held my hair while I was sick, cleaned my face, gave me water, stayed beside me until the worst passed, until I could breathe again, until the morning came. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. At 6:30, I lay in bed exhausted. Harper was in my kitchen making tea, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. I watched her, and for the first time in months I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Safe. Not because everything was okay, but because someone was there. Truly there. Later that morning my phone rang. My mother calling back. I answered. She asked if I had called the night before. Her voice was light, casual, like nothing had happened. She said her phone had been on silent. She had been at a spa with Megan, tired after the wedding. Then she asked if I needed anything. I looked at Harper, then at myself in the mirror, at the person I had become through everything I had endured. And I said no. I told her everything was fine. She accepted that easily and hung up like it was just another routine call. I put the phone down without saving anything this time. I didn't need proof anymore. Some things don't require evidence. Living through them is enough. I turned to Harper. She sat beside me, quiet, steady, present. And in that moment I understood something clearly. Family is not defined by blood. Family is the person who shows up at 3 in the morning when you cannot even stand. I didn't know it yet, but only a few weeks later I would face my family again. Not through a phone. Not from a distance. But in person. And this time, nothing would be the same. 2 years later, I was standing alone in a parking lot. Not because I had no one, but because I chose to be there by myself. The doctor had just told me there were no signs of the disease. This time I heard every word clearly. Nothing was distorted by fear anymore. I didn't cry right away. I just stood there taking a deep breath. For the first time in a long time I felt like I was truly breathing. Not just to survive, but to keep living. And then the tears came. Not from sadness or even joy, but from release. 2 years of holding everything in, finally letting go. When it passed, I knew I wasn't the same person anymore. I went back to work slowly at first, but when I returned, everything felt different. The things that used to stress me out seemed smaller, not unimportant, just no longer at the center of everything. I had seen what truly mattered, and it wasn't in deadlines or emails. My boss didn't make a big deal out of it. He just acknowledged that I was back, and somehow that meant more than any emotional speech could have. I was promoted to art director sooner than expected, not because I worked harder, but because I had become clearer. When you realize you can lose everything, you stop wasting time on things that don't deserve it. I moved out of my old apartment and into a small place with a view of the river. I brought my plant with me. It was still alive. So was I. One evening I told Harper that surviving wasn't the victory I thought it was. Living afterward was the harder part. She smiled and said I was doing well at it. She had become more than just the person who showed up that night. She became part of my life in a way I had never experienced before. Not just a friend, but something closer to family. We chose to keep showing up for each other. I still kept the folder on my phone, the one named Family, not to hold on to pain but to remember the truth, so that if I ever started to question myself again, I would have something real to return to. My actual family had faded into the background. Occasional messages, brief greetings, nothing meaningful, just enough to maintain the appearance of connection but not enough to make it real. And I stopped trying to fix it. Because I had learned something simple. You cannot force someone to be your family if they don't choose it. For the first time, I started choosing things for myself. Small things at first, like buying something I wanted without justification. It felt unfamiliar, but it felt right. Life became steady again. Not perfect, but enough. Enough to move forward. Until one Thursday evening, everything shifted. I was cooking dinner when my phone started vibrating. I didn't check it immediately, but something felt different. When I finally turned it over, I saw the name. Dad. 2 years without a real call. And now suddenly he was calling. I let it ring for a moment. I could have ignored it. I could have let it pass like so many things before. But I didn't. I answered. My voice was calm. On the other end, there was silence. Then his voice came through, but it wasn't the same. It wasn't controlled. It wasn't steady. It was shaking. He said he needed to see me. And in that moment, I knew something had shifted. Everything was about to begin again. But this time, I wasn't the same person. And neither was he, even if he didn't realize it yet. My father said he needed to see me, and for the first time his voice didn't carry control. It was thin, unsteady, almost afraid. I didn't answer right away. I wasn't listening to his words, but to what was behind them. When he told me about the diagnosis, early-stage Parkinson's, I didn't react. I just stood there in the kitchen holding the spoon, letting the sound of the pan burn louder. I listened as he explained it would get worse slowly but inevitably. Then he said he needed family. That word landed differently now, not because it had changed, but because I had. He invited me to dinner on Sunday, said everyone would be there, said we needed to talk about the future. I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was predictable. 2 years of silence, no questions about whether I was okay, whether I was alive, and now suddenly there was a future to discuss. I agreed to go, calmly, without hesitation. That seemed to matter to him more than anything else. He didn't ask anything else. No apology, no curiosity, just the call, and then it ended. Afterward, I sat down and searched for everything about the condition. I read slowly, carefully, the symptoms, the progression, the loss of control, and the one thing that stood out most was the need for long-term care. That was when everything connected. This wasn't about regret. It wasn't about repair. It was about need. He needed someone who would stay. Someone without obligations of their own. Someone who had always been expected to step in. Me. For the first time, I didn't feel hurt by that realization. I just understood it. That night, I called Harper. She didn't sound surprised when I told her I was going. I told her I needed to see them face to face. She asked if I was sure. I told her I wasn't going back. I was going to end it. She reminded me about the folder, not as a weapon but as a way to remember, to stay grounded in what had actually happened. After the call, I didn't prepare anything. No speech, no plan. I didn't need to. I already had everything I needed. The truth. Sunday came faster than I expected. I stood in front of the mirror not to impress anyone but to protect myself. Simple clothes, clean lines, steady presence. I looked at myself and saw someone completely different from 2 years ago. No fear, no need, no waiting. Just control. I picked up my bag. Inside was my phone and the folder. Then I walked out. This time I didn't look back. Because I knew everything was about to change. And they weren't ready for it. The house looked exactly the same. The white door, the clean porch, the perfectly trimmed lawn, as if nothing had ever happened. 2 years had passed, but nothing here had changed. Only me. I sat in the car for a few minutes before getting out. Not because I was hesitating, but because I wanted to be certain that I wasn't bringing any old emotions inside with me, only the truth. I walked up the path, each step steady. Not fast, not slow, just deliberate. When the door opened, my mother stood there, the familiar scent of her perfume surrounding her. She hugged me immediately without asking, as if that alone could erase everything. I didn't hug her back. I didn't pull away either. I just stood there. Inside, everything was the same. The table, the chandelier, the framed photos on the wall. I paused when I saw them. My brother's milestones, his life documented in full. Mine stopped at 18, like my story had ended there. When I saw my father, I noticed the difference immediately. He looked smaller, thinner, his hand trembled slightly even as he tried to hide it, and when he looked at me, there was no authority left, only something close to worry. Dinner passed in silence. No one spoke much. The air felt heavier with every second. Then he stood and said they needed to talk. He explained his condition, that it would get worse, that he would need care. Then he said it clearly. The best solution was for someone to move back home. His eyes stopped on me. I was the most suitable choice. Not because of love, not because of trust, but because it made sense. I had flexible work, no family of my own, no obligations. I was available. They all agreed without saying it directly. My mother added that this was the time for me to contribute. My brother said I would understand. I looked at all of them slowly, one by one. Then I smiled. Before answering, I asked a question. When was the last time any of them had asked if I was okay? When was the last time they had asked if I was even alive? No one answered. So I continued. I told them about the call 2 years ago. The day I said I had cancer. The day I cried. And the day my father chose not to deal with it. I placed my phone on the table and opened the folder. Messages, call logs, hospital records. 36 chemotherapy sessions. 0 visitors. Everything was there. The room shifted. My brother leaned closer. My mother reached out, then stopped. Even Megan stood up to look. I showed them the messages. The moment I told my mother I was scared and she asked about wedding flowers. The moment I asked for help with treatment and was told to take a loan. 47,000 to survive. 80,000 for a wedding. No one moved. No one spoke. Then I looked at my father and reminded him of his words. The exact words he had used when I needed him most. And then I gave him my answer. I told him I couldn't deal with this right now. The same 4 words. Nothing more. He broke then. His voice cracked, his eyes filled. He said he was sorry, that he was wrong, that I was his daughter. I looked at him one last time and said that 2 years ago I had been his daughter too. That was the truth he couldn't escape. I picked up my bag and walked out. No one stopped me. No one followed. This time I didn't look back. Because some answers are not meant to hurt. They are meant to end things. And that was the last time I spoke to them. I drove away from that house without turning on the radio, without music, without anything to fill the silence. Just driving. The road ahead was clear, the streetlights steady, the trees familiar. But for the first time I didn't feel pulled backward. There was nothing left behind that still had a hold on me. There was no obligation, no expectation, no voice telling me to go back. Only silence. And something that felt like freedom. I didn't cry. Not then. There was no emotional explosion, no dramatic release, just a quiet, unfamiliar lightness, as if I had finally set down something I had been carrying my entire life. The following week, my mother called. I looked at the screen for a while before answering, not because I needed to, but because I wanted to understand what would come next. Her voice was tired, different. She told me my father's condition had worsened, that Derek had taken time off work, that Megan was struggling. Then she said something that stayed with me. Megan said she was beginning to understand why I left. I closed my eyes for a moment. Not from pain, but because someone had finally seen it. My mother asked if I would come back. Not as a demand, not as an expectation, just a question. I took a breath and said no, clearly, but I told her I hoped they would be okay, and I meant it. Not because I wanted to return, but because I no longer needed them to be wrong in order to move forward. 3 weeks later, she sent a message. This time it was different. No distance, no distraction, just an apology. She said she had seen everything and would have to live with it. I read it more than once, but I didn't respond right away. I waited 2 days. Then I answered simply. I heard you. Nothing more. Not forgiveness, not rejection, just acknowledgement. Because some apologies are not meant to be accepted, they are meant to exist. My father sent a letter. Handwritten uneven, his words unsteady. He admitted he had chosen wrong, that he had placed one child's happiness above another's life, that he did not deserve to be called a father. I read it, folded it, and put it away. Not thrown out, not kept close, just placed where it belonged. In the past. 6 months later, I was well. Truly well. Not just physically, but internally. I was promoted to creative director. I had my own team, my own voice. I started dating someone named James, a teacher who wasn't perfect but was always present. And for the first time, that was enough. Harper was still there too, every Thursday. Not out of obligation, but by choice. I realized my family was no longer defined by where I came from. It was defined by who stayed. I still kept the folder on my phone. Not to relive anything, but to remember clearly. Not everything deserves to be forgotten. I once believed family was about blood. Now I understand it is about presence, about who remains when you have nothing left to give. If there is one thing I know now, it is this. You do not have to stay where you are not chosen. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to leave quietly, without anger, without noise, and not return. My name is Camille. I am 30 years old. I survived cancer. And more importantly, I survived my family. If you are hearing this, remember one thing. You do not need to apologize for existing.